Welcome back to the Building Bigger Lives podcast. I'm Kathryn Pedersen here with my co-host, Michael Regan. And today we have someone I've known for a long time and is well respected in our industry and is just a great person to be around. Ryan Grant from NEO. He is the president there, and he's really trying to redefine the mortgage industry, which is something he's like so passionate. You can feel it every time you talk to him. But also he's just one of those people, he's a girl dad, which, I can relate to that. Has a great wife, lives in a ski town as well. So we always have lots to talk about. And he is a coach, mortgage professional for almost 20 years. And he really is redefining what his role is to make sure that he's always providing value. So when we were getting ready to go into the podcast, he said, "Hey, what can I do to provide more value?" And that's a Ryan Grant question. So with that, I'll bring in Michael, and then Ryan. Michael, thanks for being here.
Always happy to be with you, Catherine. It's a lot of fun to get to do these, and it's uniquely enjoyable when we get to bring on so many interesting people that we know and we get to run into. Ryan and I have had the pleasure of being in a couple of rooms together over the last month. Catherine, you were with us. We were all together at the Housing Wire gathering, and then the Mastermind Summit a couple weeks later. Ryan, I think you're getting ready to head off to another event later today. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
But what has always intrigued me, and I'm really glad that we get a little bit of time here today to record this, is to learn about some of the genesis of your journey, to learn about where some of these inspirations as a leader may have come from in your life, maybe as a young guy, maybe even long before you thought about yourself as a professional. There could have been moments in your life that would be great for the audience to learn about. But before I set it up too much, thanks for joining us today. It's really great to have you.
Absolutely my pleasure. When I got a chance to meet you in person, I was telling Kathryn and everybody else, like, I've always heard of the mythical Michael Regan, but never had a chance to meet you in person. But everyone has said such great things to say about you for years and years and years, and some of the best people I know are coached and led by you. And so it was really cool to get a chance to meet you in person. And Kathryn, obviously, knowing you have this podcast and us going way back, a decade plus. It's been awesome to see, your leadership journey in this space as well, and just excited to be with you guys today. So thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, let's dive right in. I mean, I obviously dropped the seed in the ground. Let's see if we can get it to grow a little. When you're a young guy, Ryan, what's life like? Like in your journey, did you grow up in an environment where you always saw yourself as a kid on sports teams getting drawn into leadership, or in school into leadership, or did that come through a unique event that maybe we wouldn't know about? Tell us about the young man, Ryan Grant.
It's an interesting question, and I don't know if I spent enough time kind of analyzing this or not, but I had a really incredible childhood. Amazing parents. We weren't wealthy, but we were, we didn't suffer for anything. We lived in a small little rodeo town called Sonora up by Yosemite, which was a great place to grow up. And I was always very competitive from a young age. And I think I started doing martial arts when I was 4. I started boxing when I was 6. I started wrestling when I was 10. And so, all of these kind of sports, if you didn't win, it hurt, right? Like, it literally hurt, right? It wasn't just like a hurt psychology. You had bruises. And so I don't know if that kind of led to my competitive nature, but I was very much into sports. Pretty much all I was into as a young kid: basketball, football, martial arts, track, you name it, I've done it. And I think the leadership quality, I really started to understand that leadership comes from finding confidence in the process of becoming good at something. Once you've gone through the process of stepping into the ring with someone and getting knocked out, or having someone pin you in a matter of seconds and you feel like you have no control, having somebody just completely dominate, right? And then you step back in, you get a little bit better, and you get a little bit better, you get a little bit better. I think that's really where my confidence came from, is that at some point I got into those rings and I was on the other side of that equation. And I was able to then lead other people through that process. right? I was teaching martial arts when I was in high school, and I was able to help people understand like it's okay to not be good at something initially. And even though like those sports, if you're not good, it's embarrassing, right? Because it's like, there's 15-year-old boys that step into a boxing ring and get beat up, right? It's like you don't want to go back and have that happen again. So you have to kind of lead people through the fact that like it's a journey, but you'll get there. And then I think I just translated that into business as I went through that journey myself. Like I was not a good mortgage professional when I first started, and I was not good in many aspects of it for many years, and just learning, being in masterminds with Kathryn and other people, and always being kind of open-minded to the fact that we can and we always should be looking to get better. And at any point, if we think that we have it down, that's the danger point, right? If we're comfortable, we should be scared, right? If we're not leaning into change and improvement and an uncomfortable situation, like you got to look around the corner and see what's coming, because it's something's coming.
Sounds a lot like the modern philosopher Mike Tyson might have been right. Everybody has a plan till he gets punched in the mouth, and you might have lived that. I hear individual sports there, Ryan, and yet there were some team sports too. Basketball we talked about as well. How did you sort that out in your head as a young man? Because your experience in an individual sport is wildly different in the way that you prepare than it is in a team environment. Did you have to find different methods of excelling in each of those, or were some of those things more common as you look back on them?
Even though they seemed like individual sports, I never approached it that way. I was fortunate that my dad was my karate instructor, and he ran a studio. Literally, our garage was our studio, and every 3-4 nights a week, we'd have 20, 30, you know, everything from small kids to adults that would come train. And then when we'd go to compete, we'd go to compete as a team. And it just happened to be that I would go in and do my part, but we'd always figure out like, how are we doing as a group, right? Same thing in wrestling, in boxing, not as much, but we tried to stay close to our people. And then, every other sport, even golf still today, like my favorite golf events that I go to are team ones, when we'll like a Ryder Cup style thing, right? And so I think I get a lot of energy from community. And I think that it wasn't until I don't know, probably the past 5 years when we started Neo, where we were able to create and build this incredible community, that I really saw the power of that, right? Like the power of what everybody believing in the same thing, like everyone paddling in the same direction, everyone being mission aligned. I've really felt the community and the power there. And that's why I think even though some of them were individual sports, I never approached them that way.
And Ryan, what you said, I want to pull out a few nuggets that people don't miss. So first is becoming, just that word stuck with me, of like, so much of it is the journey. And I feel like with you, your curiosity always tells me you're always on the journey, right? You're always becoming. You're so curious about that. So one of the things that I've noticed about you is because you're so humble in how you approach things, you have that curiosity, but that had to have come from somewhere. And are there any leaders that you've learned that from, or was that just naturally part of you? Because I think that can be rare in our industry, and it's fun to see.
I would love to say that I was always a great leader, but that would not be true at all. My team from 2013 to 2017-ish would tell you that I was very much not a great leader, because I didn't know how, right? I knew how to lead myself, right? I knew how to create results. I knew how to, grow business in the way that I knew how, but I didn't really know how to tap into, help someone find their fullest potential, right? I didn't know anything about extreme ownership. So literally, like my team will tell you this: if a file like would be blowing up, I'd get a call from a realtor. My whole team would come in my office, and they'd all be like just scared, because I'd be like, "Whose fault is this?" And then everyone's looking at each other, and like I had to go to the extreme ownership muster that Jocko put on, and he's yelling at me with a loudspeaker at 4 a.m. doing push-ups, and then I go to his event and I'm like, then it opens my eyes like, oh my God, I was an idiot. Like, what a terrible leadership style. And extreme ownership is a way better leadership style, right? So learn from him. Our Lone Atlas and L360 group that we have, and Tim Brahim has been my coach for a very long time. He has really been helpful in perspective shift, right? Like living in gratitude, making sure that, you know, your team sees a vision for tomorrow greater than they do today. That was not even on my radar in 2015. Like I had my team of people that worked for me, not with me, and they worked for me, and I never really gave much thought to like, why are they here? What does their tomorrow look like? Right? Like if I just show up every day and I continue to do what I've always done, are they just going to be in Groundhog Day for the next 20 years? And is that inspiring for them? But I didn't stop and think about that. Right. And it wasn't until I was taught to like think of like try and put myself in the shoes of my team or my business partners is how we refer to everybody now, that I was able to say like, hey, look, like if I'm the leader, I have to absolutely go grow for them to have the opportunity to grow, right? For them to have a vision that is a better future than their current state. And that gave me a ton of energy and it gave me a lot of motivation. And it also gave me a lot of pride when we accomplished those, whatever the next task was. Then I would, like my processor in 2015 is now the head of operations for a major mortgage company, right? Like that would have never happened if I didn't realize like I need to keep going if these amazing people for them to have an opportunity to keep going as well.
Ryan, you just shared a story that someone out there today is listening to, and they're like, holy crap, that's me. I'm the guy that's hosting that team meeting. These are my teammates that are walking in looking at me like, am I going to be the one whose head gets handed on the platter today?
Yeah.
They understand that environment. And I suppose we all do to some degree. So when that clarity happened, you mentioned Tim and some of the coaching, you mentioned some of the inspiration of authors like Jocko. Sounds like you spent some time with him. Was that a quick flip for you? Or how would you encourage someone listening today who's like, that's me, I need to make that change? You're talking about vision as if you heard about it and suddenly everything shifted, but it probably didn't happen exactly like that.
What's interesting is I've always had the ability to just shift on a dime, right? So my wife will tell you this. Unfortunately, she doesn't love it, but I watched a documentary called Forks Over Knives, and it was a Tuesday night, and on Wednesday morning she woke up to her husband being a vegan for a year, right? It was just like cold turkey vegan, right? And then
Wait, cold turkey, pun intended?
yeah,
Fair.
no turkey vegan, I should say. Um, and like, so when I read the book Extreme Ownership, right, immediately afterwards, I was like, I'm never going to do that again, right? Any problem is my fault, right? And what the shift that did take me a little while is actually believing it was my fault as opposed to just saying it was my fault. That took a little time. But I've always been kind of had the ability to see something and say like, that's it. I mean, what a great story from one of my favorite books, The Infinite Game. It's kind of like our genesis of Neo. Simon Sinek talks about how Steve Jobs and Apple, they were fully committed to this operating system and millions and millions of dollars invested. He went to go see IBM and they created the mouse, right? Prior to that, you had to like know how to type your way through a computer. And he saw the mouse and he went back to his board and he's like, we're scrapping the entire thing. Like this is the future. And they're like, you kidding me? Like, it's going to bankrupt the company. He's like, I'd rather bankrupt the company myself than have our competitors do it. And like, he just saw it and he was decisive around it. And I think that's one of the things that I like to try and continue to practice is decisiveness, right? Like, if I see it, it should be like a hell yes or hell no. And if it's a hell yes, we're just going to go, right? We're not going to mess around and slow play it for a year or maybe it to death. So I think to your question, I've had that ability to like just shift relatively quickly.
So, Kathryn, that's a really intriguing answer to me, and I hope for those of our audience that are listening, if you're struggling with the idea that okay, but that's not my natural style, that sounds like Ryan's. Perhaps, and I want to give some latitude for the fact that we're all wired certain ways. But I think what I heard as we listened to him unpack that answer is there's a lot of power in making a commitment and burning the ships and not looking back. There's a lot of power in that because it allows you to take that ownership on yourself and therefore eliminate a lot of the anxiety that comes from what if, because we have no choice. We're moving forward. Kathryn, I know that's something that you know about in your life in different ways, personally and professionally. But it's great to hear Ryan describe that, even if that comes from a natural place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that so many people vacillate for so long that they never end up anywhere and they never actually set the direction of their boat. And that, I think, can really and make it so that you end up in France when you meant to end up in, New York. So if you never really set the direction, that's going to be tough. And I think, Ryan, one thing for you is I would call you an implementer, as far as, hey, this is what I'm doing and this is how I'm going to do it, and I want to know all the pieces and parts, and then we're going to do that. But for leaders who can be that way, sometimes it's hard to bring their team along because it's like, hey, I made this decision, this is what I'm doing, and they're like, wait, what? I thought we were going. So what have you learned over the last few years about putting your team on the same direction as your, maybe what they see as a crazy thought is?
Great question. And one that I, again, early in my leadership journey got wrong, right? Where they would actually, we'd go to Todd Duncan events or I'd go to conference or whatever, and they would always dread it when I came back. Because I would come back with a notebook full of implementation ideas, right? Or I'd go to Costa Rica for 8 days with the L360 group and just massively immerse ourselves in life-changing processes. And then I come home and I'm this whole new human being for my wife. And she was like, okay, like, do you want to tell me what we're doing here? Um, and so I've learned over time that leadership is it's not a solo journey, right? It's really just about, creating a directional energy and then allowing other people to choose into it, right? But you have to allow them to choose into it. It has to be their decision. And so, when we made the decision to partner with Better, for us initially, it was like a hell no. Like, are you kidding me? Like, that's like the Death Star. They're the worst. Because that was our thought. And curiosity again saved the day, right? It allowed us to be open-minded to the fact that something else might be true. But when, we had months of analyzing and going back and forth before we brought our larger team into that conversation. And then, we knew that we needed to take them through that same journey. And then we allowed them to make the decision. It wasn't our decision, right? We didn't take anyone anywhere. We just put the option on the table and said, look, if we're going to pick a future, which one are we going to pick? And every single person, to their credit, chose this direction. And I think that was something I wish I would have learned earlier, but you see, and I obviously relate a lot to the mortgage industry, but you see a lot of people that will make a decision to do something, and then when the decision's made, they'll tell their team that it's happening tomorrow. And no one, I don't care who you are, no one likes to feel like life is happening to them, right? They genuinely want to know that they have agency in their life and their profession, and that it's happening with them and by them. And if there's any leaders out there, bring your team in on any big decisions, and they'll appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that it's always hard as a leader because you're like, how much can I tell my team? And how much can I not? And when's the right time? And how are they going to react? And there's all this fear around it. So I think some of it is just saying, hey, I have to trust the team that I've built. And I think that that you've always been a great person of being able to trust the people around you. I remember when you introduced me to your team, it was like, hey, this is like you really come across as everyone on your team is an equal.
100%.
Yeah, and that's just how they are. Like, hey, here's the person that handles this, and they just do it, and they have ownership of it. And I'm sure part of that comes from that extreme ownership group. But I know there's people that just don't trust their team enough. So how do you build that trust in a whole team between different members? Because it's not just you trusting them, it's the processor trusting the underwriter, et cetera.
I think a lot of it is just kind of bearing the ego. Um, our industry has done a pretty poor job of leadership training in general. And a lot of people feel like if it's going to get done, they have to do it themselves. And because we don't train leaders in an appropriate way, they have PTSD when they've hired someone, they didn't ask the right questions in the interview, they don't train them appropriately, they don't lead them appropriately, and that person ends up, kind of boomeranging away from their organization. And then they feel like it's just a battle they can't win, right? Or they hire someone and they make mistakes because they weren't trained properly, or they didn't have they weren't given enough kind of acceptance to say like, hey, it's okay if you make mistakes, right? Like that's going to happen. And so then people think I have to do it on my own. And it wasn't until, I was learning that lesson the hard way many times that I said, like you mentioned earlier, I see them as my equal. I don't. I genuinely see them as far superior to me in what they do. Um, I don't even try to do what they do, right? In my 10 plus year origination career, I never knew what my team did, right? I just knew that they did it really, really well, right? And they were incredible because I gave them the ability to be that, right? I didn't micromanage them. I just said, look, I don't need you to just do this. I need you to own this, right? To where I never have to think about it. And the superpower that then gave me was I was able to stay in my genius zone where I don't just have a good return on my investment, I have really good return on my energy. And I think that people miss that part of it, right? They do a lot of things that make them money, but are energetically displeasing or draining. And it's not until you realize that if you do things that are energetically positive, right, it's just a renewable resource, right? You can do it 8 hours a day, and you can go home from fifth gear all day long to sixth gear as a mom or a dad or as a husband or wife. But if you do things all day long that are energetically kind of below the bar, you're going to go home in third gear, and you're going to have a hard time finding that gear again the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And Ryan, you talked about the influence of different authors and different leaders that you reflected upon. You said, we had a Simon Sinek book that was part of the genesis of what we started. You know what I hear when you talk is a lot. I don't know if you spent time with Dr. Carol Dweck, the Stanford professor who wrote Mindset, but she documented that tension between two successful groups that she followed for over 20 years. One that had a fixed mindset, one that had a growth mindset. And I regularly hear the growth mindset in even these examples of you admitting where you struggled as learning as a leader, where you struggled interacting with your team, maybe even struggled in how do I come home and translate this to my wife in a way that gets us moving together as a family. I think that's really important for our audience to hear because when we embrace that growth mindset, Kathryn, you pointed it out earlier, it's a journey where we're always learning. We're not making mistakes. We're just simply learning new things that inform us about how to continue that growth process that we're on. And it's exciting to hear that. We've just sat in a couple of rooms together where lots of people are talking about where will the growth be in the future of the housing industry.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to hear you, even if we're dipping a bit into your opinion rather than into data, because we don't have all the data
Right.
that we need yet. I think it's important to hear from folks who are absorbing great leaders like we heard from in Colorado and other folks we interacted with. Where would you encourage someone if they're trying to develop a growth mindset about the future of the housing industry? What are some of the things you're thinking about? I'd love to hear some thoughts that you've taken away from these rooms.
The biggest challenge I've seen in our space over the last couple of years is people are pretty closed-minded um, to the fact that change is going to be very real, right? I've heard this so many times in the past couple of years. Everyone said, I talked to this guy the other day. He goes, in 2000, someone told me that the loan officer is going to be dead in a few years. Good thing I didn't listen to him. It's going to be the same. And it's like, look, he might be right, right? This might have very little impact. And 20 years from now, we might be repeating the same sentence. But he could also be very wrong, right? And not having a firm opinion, right? Not saying like I'm doing exactly the right things today and I'm going to continue to do those things tomorrow, right? Just being curious to the fact that you can improve, right? Being curious to the fact that you can, implement a strategy that could be successful, being open-minded to like just being a constant learner. The concept of having a beginner's mindset is something that I think is very underrated. And most people just genuinely cannot wrap their head around. But when I hear someone tell me, "Oh, I've been doing this for 30 years," I'm like, "Oh man, poor thing." Right? Because that's their reality, right? Uh, that's who they believe themselves to be, is a 30-year veteran, and they value themselves for that. I would rather work with a 2-year veteran at this point, right? Because they don't know 2020 and 2021 existed, right? They don't know anything other than the market that we're in today, right? And they don't have expectations that are unreasonable. And they likely have a work ethic and an open-mindedness to say, like, just bring me all the information, teach me everything you can. I want to go to every conference. I want to listen to every webinar. I want to be on every mortgage coach. I want to learn how to do this, right? And so the future of the housing industry will belong to people who have a beginner's mindset, because tomorrow's not going to be the same, right? Something's going to change drastically tomorrow that we don't know about today. But if we genuinely believe that we have it figured out, right? Whether it's our technology, whether it's our reach to the consumer, whether it's the value we provide, if it's the community that we're in, if it's the uh, you know system of team or process, like if you think that that is dialed in today, and you're not open-minded to maneuvering it through what we would likely consider the most evolutionary time in all of our lives, it's going to be a hard road for anybody.
Yeah, Ryan, I think that beginner's mindset that you brought up is the key. And I think that learning that all of us need to be doing all the time. I think the ones who are like, I remember sitting with someone at Sales Mastery, and every time the numbers would come up, they would say, less volume than me. I don't need to listen to this one. And I
Yeah,
was like, huh, I'm always going to listen to those because they probably have the new idea
yeah.
and the thing I haven't thought about. So I think it's so important for people to do that. But one thing I want to make sure we ask you is what do we not know about Ryan Grant that you want known? Because I think that you've been out in the mortgage industry for a long time, but I think it's different. Like, um, I you're a different person. Not that you don't come across the same all the time, but I don't think people realize how genuine you are. So I want to make sure that you have a chance to verbalize anything you want to about who you are that maybe people don't understand or don't know.
It's a great question. I think that the best way to help people understand is I'm a pretty introverted person. Like I genuinely enjoy solitude. I, um, given the opportunity to go to like the biggest party or event or stay home with my family, like I'm picking staying home with my family every time. It's just out of necessity that I, am out in the world. Um, if it weren't for my wife, I'd probably have no friends here in Park City, because I just, I focus on work and my kids and, trying to kind of live a good life. But she opens doors for me to, meet new people. And um, so if I walk into a room, I'm not the life of the party, right? Like I'm the quiet guy. Right? I'm the guy who's kind of trying to find someone I know, and I'll probably talk to that person for 2 hours and then leave. And that might come across as me being standoffish or not personable in some capacity. And I just, that's very much not true, but you might just need to come introduce yourself to me, because I don't have that trigger. Like my 9-year-old daughter will walk to a room of strangers and be the life of the party. My 10-year-old daughter will hide behind me, and I'm like trying to hide behind her. So we're very much the same in that regard.
That's an awesome visual. I think you found a great audience here with Kathryn and I. We're we're students of introversion. We in fact are, or one of our favorite books is Quiet by Susan Cain. Her subtitle fascinates us. It's the power of introverts in a world that can't stop talking. And it really is a great exploration of all of history's great leaders who led with introverted styles. And it's very empowering to those of us who don't need to be. You made some comment on the introduction about the fact that we've lived in this parallel universe for many years where we just hadn't had that chance to connect.
Yeah.
I think that's indicative of both of us being introverted leaders, and so it's really good for me to hear that, because I hope our audience hears that. I hope they know that, hey, embrace your authenticity, whether you're introverted or extroverted, or like Kathryn will point out, ambiverted, that mythical space in between, where sometimes people read it the wrong way. But it's great to hear you say that, Ryan. And Kathryn, that's such a great question, because when we get to see the deeper cut with some of our guests, I think that's when we find our audience really engages all the more. They certainly get to see the guy who's on stage. They get to hear from you when you're on a lot of these forums. But thank you for spending time with us today and giving us a little bit of a glimpse at some of the backstory and maybe some of the current reality, Ryan. It's really great to hear from you. And if you don't mind, I think we're going to need to revisit your journey as it goes down the road, because my sense is you're going to continue learning, and we'll interview you, months down the road, and there'll be whole new topics to talk about, because you will have probably had one of those moments where something made the pivot and you're going to teach us something new.
Yes, I would be more than happy to, and I'm really grateful, not only that you guys had me on and we got to spend the time together, but that you're doing this largely, for our audience. You guys are both great leaders in your own right, and being able to pull really important information out of people that might not share it openly is a real superpower. So I appreciate you guys doing this.
Well, thanks for all you're doing, Kathryn. Always great to spend time with you. Ryan, thanks for being our guest. And to those of you listening on the Building Bigger Lives podcast, thanks for joining in for another episode. Every Wednesday, we drop a new episode. We try to bring you a combination of topics that we care deeply about and guests we think you're going to engage with. And today was no exception. We'll look forward to seeing you on an episode soon. Thanks.